Good morning, friends. Today I want to take you to Isaiah chapter 46, verses 7 to 10. And the reasons I want to do that is because we're all familiar with the events of this past week down in Washington, D.C., and the general state of our nation over the past year. And when I got up this morning and grabbed my phone, one of the first news stories that popped up was about there being an increased National Guard presence at the upcoming inauguration compared to previous years. And I think that a person will be forgiven if they look at all these things, and I really mean this no matter what side of the political aisle that person might be on, but they look at all this and say, wow, this is all just a tad bit scary. But that's where we return swiftly to the Word of God to remind ourselves of some foundational truths. And one of those truths comes from this passage in Isaiah, where God is pronouncing judgment on those who worship false gods, and he makes a comparison between the idols dedicated to those false gods and himself as the one true God. So God describes how the people make for themselves these golden idols, and then in verse 7 he says, they lift it to their shoulders, they carry it, they set it in its place, and it stands there. It cannot move from its place. If one cries to it, it does not answer or save him from his troubles. So God is making it clear that those idols are inert. They are powerless. There is nothing actually there that can save the people who are bowing down in front of it. But then he goes on to say in verse 8, remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish my purpose. And while God originally spoke this to people who were worshiping those false idols, it's something we need to remember as well. And we need to stand firm in this truth, that God is God and there is none other. He declares the end from the beginning. From ancient times, he not just predicted, but he declared what would be. That means he didn't just passively observe what was going to happen. He ordained what was going to happen. And that reminds us that God is the master of history. He is the Lord of all that transpires. And even things that man intends for evil, he turns to good. And he says, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish my purpose. And friends, I just want to encourage you with that this morning, because we are still dealing with COVID. We are still dealing with racial tensions. We are dealing with a political system, again, regardless of what side of the aisle you might be on, that seems to be standing on its head. And it would be tempting to fear. It would be tempting to say, I have no idea what's going to happen next, and have that thought lead you into a spiral of anxiety about the future. But God remains in control. He is going to accomplish his purposes. And for the time being, his purposes require that we be in this state, at least from our perspective, of uncertainty. But one thing we can be absolutely certain of is that God is in charge. He is sovereign. Nothing has happened that has taken him by surprise. Nothing has happened that he isn't using to bring about his ultimate purpose. And that purpose will not be thwarted. He will bring it to fruition, guaranteed. But maybe what you're concerned about or struggling with this morning, or just simply thinking about, has nothing to do with politics or COVID or any of those so-called larger matters. Maybe you're not feeling well. Maybe you're experiencing the sorrow of loss. Perhaps you have an issue at home or work or with friends, and you just don't know how it's going to be resolved and what it's going to look like once it is resolved. In all these matters, trust in the Lord and look to him. Study the scriptures, which are his word. Study them for wisdom, for he gives wisdom to all who ask in faith, and he will never fault you the lack of wisdom that drives you to seek greater wisdom from him. And then, having received his wisdom, do what he has called you to do. Act righteously. Do the right thing according to his standard. Be holy in your motivations, morally pure, and then do the best you can. And leave the outcome and the consequences to the Lord, for he will accomplish his purposes no matter what, and those purposes will lead to ultimate good. Of that we can be assured. So have a good and godly day. Be encouraged, I pray, and I hope to see you soon.